What up, what up, what up? Back again. Today's video is called The ABCs of Mind Control. So I'm really having fun doing these videos. I would probably do videos like multiple videos a day if I thought it was really having an effect. But this last video I did seems to have gotten a disproportionate response, like more than normal. And so let's talk about that. There's this thing called the Zeitgeist. People have talked about that. It's a German word that means the spirit of the times. And so it's interesting. To me, this relates to a concept called hive mind or the noosphere, the concept that there's a collective awareness of the human species. And I believe that people who are attuned towards similar topics and similar interests, they share a common mind. And, there's a lot of historic examples of how Marconi and Alexander Graham Bell and different people were making discoveries of radio around the world at the same time, like without necessarily having direct communication. So there's an interesting phenomenon I don't know if a lot of people know about, but it's called the Chans, 4chan and 8chan. They have these message boards, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but let's say certain of them revolve around politics and, worldwide current events, let's say. And I really got into this back in 2017. I believe it was 2016, 2017. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because it could get me banned or shadow banned or something. I'm shadow banned as fuck, like more than ever. It's crazy. Like the more on point I get, the more shadow banned I am. Like I can remember a time in 2016 where I was taking this like 4chan activism onto Twitter, and I used to get like 2,000 impressions, 1,000 impressions. Now I go on Twitter and post and I get, single digit impressions. So less than 10 most of the time. And same's true of Instagram, Facebook, like all the social media. My favorite social media was MySpace back before they got all the algorithms. I was a huge hit on MySpace. I got thousands of plays on all my songs and stuff like that. And I was, recording artists and world famous like musicians and stuff were getting in contact with me. But once Facebook came out and MySpace went away, like it all got ruled by the algo. Even in the early days of Facebook, I did really well, but I would always criticize like the most current thing, like whatever the current thing is, I would break it apart and criticize it. And I'll criticize Facebook and I'll criticize everything, politics. And so gradually ban, shadow ban, which means like basically nobody sees your content. Even your own followers will not generally see your content unless they go directly looking for it. But anyway, the point is, despite all that, my last video was very successful. So I'm going to continue on that thread, the ABCs of mind control. So what does that mean? Mind control goes back to the ancient world, and a lot of it revolves around mystery cults and these hereditary cults of different castes of society. Like there was a cult for the military caste, right? And that's closely related to like Mithraism and Mithras. And what we call Christianity was a Roman military cult for the slaves only. Like none of the landowners and none of the wealthy people in Rome ever would do Christian. That was a slave religion, right? The warlords had a warlord religious caste, and they had secret societies, and they had their religious constructs around that. And then same with, banking, and same with, and they actually in ancient Rome, they would have priests that actually lived their whole life based on the planet Mars or the planet Jupiter. Like they would wear certain colors and they would have certain ritual implements to symbolize the planet. And they would do all their daily activities like in accord with the symbolism of certain planets, right? So like Jupiter was the law god and medicine and so on. And Mars is the war god and so on like that. And on and on. And fertility gods, this and that. So, all the religions that we have now that are considered world religions in their inception were slave cults, and most of them were sex cults as well. So that's kind of interesting to me. But my point is to just illustrate how mind control and psychological warfare goes back to the most ancient records of human history that we have. And most humans are most easily manipulated through sex and violence. So in other words, by dividing people and by using their desire to reunite, that's how they drive people around. And so in the 1940s, the Nazis, like all the sciences at the time, the Nazis were at the forefront of everything. And actually a lot of the top Nazi physicists and scientists were Jews. People don't want to think about how Nazis and Jews are pretty much intertwined and how a lot of the top Nazis were Jews and stuff like that. And look at today, I mean, the most famous Nazi in the world is George Soros, and he pretty much single-handedly created the modern state of Ukraine and their neo-Nazi Azov battalion, who was just decided by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League that supposedly protects against anti-Semitism, said that the Azov Nazis are not against Jews. So that's pretty interesting. Something to think about. I'm not going to comment on it too much right now. People probably know if they can parse and even process what I'm saying. They already know what I'm talking about. But anyways, so the basics of mind control. So this is a clear illustration of one of the biggest ABCs of mind control, which is called the double bind. So the double bind is where you take and you give people contradictory commands so that there's no possible way to fulfill the commands. And they also at the same time are given this fear that if they don't fulfill the commands, they could be food deprived or beaten or jailed or whatever. So that it breaks their brain. It breaks the logical mind. It's kind of like in 1984 where Winston's getting tortured and he's like 2 + 2 is 5 and he keeps torturing him and he's like, and he keeps giving different answers and the guy's like, I'm going to keep torturing you and electroshocking you until you just give up trying to give the answer and just say, okay, I'll answer whatever you tell me to answer. And that's kind of where most human beings are at right now, because they're presented with a double bind in every situation, like Nazi Jews. Like Kanye comes out. I feel so bad for Kanye. And I've been following this whole saga of his mind control since the beginning and how he's abused and tortured and had his jaw busted up and all kinds of stuff like that. And God, he was married to the most mentally ill sex tape producing crazy person of all time. And now he's finally starting to look back on that and be like, oh yeah, she's involved in a child trafficking, blood drinking cult. And now he's finally like starting to try and break away from that, but he's still under mind control. But the thing is, okay, so Kanye comes out and he gives a perfect instance of the double bind. He's like, oh, the world's run by Jews. And then he's like, oh yeah, all my handlers and the people that all made me rich and famous are all Jews. And then he's like, worship Jesus, right? Everyone should worship Jesus. That's why I came out with the Christian album. But isn't Jesus King of the Jews? See, perfect instance of a double bind. Like on the one hand, he's saying these people are the most evil people in the world, but then he's saying you should all worship them. Pretty interesting. So that's an example of a double bind. So so in mind control, my first introduction to the real technology of mind control was this book by Fritz Springmeier called, it's something about like how to create an undetectable mind-controlled slave. And this is highly related to his book on the Illuminati, his various writings about the Illuminati, which I think Springmeier was a plant. I actually corresponded with him somewhat online back in the day, but I think he is himself a victim of mind control, and he's also a mind control handler for people. But so there's a lot of factual information and very, very useful information in his books, but I don't think that he wrote them. I think that he was instructed and, manipulated into putting out that information. And so they want it out there. It's actually on the CIA website, the book about Illuminati mind control, which is an interesting thing in itself, since pretty well the CIA was directly involved in that. So, and they don't fear any kind of repercussions by putting out this. In fact, it's part of the trauma induction. Like if you're told and believe and are shown evidence that there's a global mind control cult, like that's pretty traumatic, right? So that just further enhances their power, that they can put it out and be like, yes, this is a known thing, and nothing's being done about it, right? But in that book, he goes into some detail about these different types of programming. And the one that I want to focus on deals with previous video, about mind control relating to sex and homosexuality and these dominance and submission cults like the Freemasons and the Templars and stuff like that. So their whole thing kind of revolves around what we would consider beta programming. So beta programming is also called sex kitten programming, right? Like I was talking about the cat worm parasites and how they drive people into heat like a crazy ass cat, right? And make people like over hypersexualized, especially in their youth, right? So they get this really perverted, violent introduction to sexuality. So it kind of prevents them ever having a normal sexuality or a marriage or a healthy family in their life, which is, hate to break it to people, mother, father, child. That's what produces a family. We're all humans, right? We have sexual dimorphism. Anyone that's listening to this video, unless you're a clone or some kind of test tube baby. You're the product of male-female sexual congress, right? That's natural, that's normal, that's, heteronormative. Hate to break it to people, that's normal. That's what's healthy for humans. We're built that way. It's in our DNA, it's in our brains, it's in every hardwired aspect of it. And so anything people are saying and propagating and telling different about that is an instance of mind control. And, they traumatize people at birth, right? They traumatize people at a very young age. That's why they're all about grooming. That's why Walt Disney Company was sending boats out to Epstein Island, and they run a global human trafficking operation through their resorts. That's why they're super wealthy. That's why Walt Disney was a Templar, and that's why he was a Jacques de Molay, Order of de Molay. Jacques de Molay was the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and so on. So this is a super old thing where they use they call beta sex kitten programming to program people into perverse sexuality at a young age for mind control. So they really want it to be like, a lot of people complain about the stigma against homosexuality and stuff like that. But, the stigma is actually created by these programmers. They want there to be a stigma. They want people to be traumatized by having this deviant sexuality. And generally, the most mind-controlled people are people that are ostensibly projecting as these like conservative Christians and stuff, but they're actually the most perverted. Like Mitt Romney, perfect example. He's highly implicated in this recent ritual sex abuse scandal in Utah and stuff like that. And a lot of the top level politicians are. Adam Schiff, not that particular scandal, but my point is they're all in sex blackmail. Pedo Biden is one of the most obvious example, but notably pretty well all the presidents in modern history. Actually, going back to Teddy Roosevelt was the first of them, and that's why you have the teddy bear. And I'm not going to go all into that, but yeah, he was a pedo as well, and he was blackmailed on that basis. And actually, the Watergate hearings and Nixon resignation was all around Nixon trying to get control of these pedophile sexual blackmail files, so that he could basically, free up the U.S. government from the control of this pedophilia faction. But he was not successful, and that's why he was basically, drummed out of the presidency, because he himself was blackmailed. They had blackmail on him. That's why he wanted to go after it all. But my point is to say, back into this sexual blackmail, because that's the main angle that we're at right now. And, in the hive mind of collective consciousness, like Elon Musk and people are starting to talk about sexual human trafficking on Twitter and pedophilia, and how all this like homosexuality and stuff like that and transgenderism is a mask and a front for child trafficking. And I hate to say it, people don't want to face that reality. Unfortunately, some of us have direct life experiences with that, of seeing people sex abused and child trafficked at a young age. That has directly impacted my life. And I have to sit here and be ridiculed and mocked by people when I expose the pedophilia. They love to gaslight everything. And, a lot of times people and kids who are victims of this, they'll go to their parents and talk about it and be like, hey, I'm a victim of that. And the parents will gaslight them and tell them that didn't happen. And they'll try to, make a joke out of it. I've seen it time and time again. And I've had firsthand experience of that. People and parents that basically put their kids directly in the contact with pedophiles, with known pedophiles, right? And then if anything's said about it, it gets mocked and denied, and they call the kid a liar, and they gaslight them, right? And I've even had people, that I'll tell about Epstein Island and stuff like that, and I'll tell them, hey, yeah, Anthony Kiedis and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and their drummer and all these people were out on Epstein Island, and they're pedophiles, and they're supporting Jeffrey Epstein's child trafficking operation, and a lot of movie stars and all these people. And I have people come back and basically mock me and say, yeah, I love the pedo music, I love the drug addict music, and they try to use that to mock me. And that's the world that we're living in right now. But no amount of that mockery and gaslighting and like double bind mind control process is going to prevent what's already happening, which is the exposure of this global network of child trafficking, child pornography that's all pervasive through Twitter and Facebook and all the music industry, and Balenciaga and Kanye West and the Kardashians. They're all involved in that, and they don't even try to hide it really. They're kind of proud about it. And Elton John, same. And so all these top level celebrities are involved. And so you better prepare yourself to see that and to admit that, because it's going to become undeniable. And you're going to have to really question and ask yourself, which side of it have you been on in this time?